What if we've already received a message from aliens, but we just don't know what it means? Shocked? Let's start then. In this video, you'll know about the WOW signal, which is one of the most mysterious signals ever detected from space. Dr. Mara Calloway sat hunched over a dimly lit desk in the archives of the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, the faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. She wasn't supposed to be there. This section of the archives required special clearance, the kind she didn't have. But years of professional exile had taught her one thing. The real truth was never where it was supposed to be. She hadn't planned on coming back to academia, not after the public ridicule, not after she was forced out of NASA for suggesting that language patterns in deep space signals weren't just random cosmic noise, but something more, something intelligent. Now her hands trembled as she flipped through an aging manila folder, its classified stamps faded but unmistakable. The title alone made her breath hitch. WOW Signal Response Protocol, 1980. Her pulse quickened as she scanned the pages. At first it was standard bureaucratic nonsense, an analysis of the famous 1977 WOW signal, dismissed as an anomaly by the scientific community. But deeper into the file something changed. There were transcripts, strings of numbers and letters. Then a translation, a message. She clamped a hand over her mouth, eyes darting across the page. The 1977 WOW signal had been more than an unexplained anomaly. It had been a deliberate transmission. The math was irrefutable. The structure, the repetition, the embedded binary sequences, it all pointed to an intelligent source. But then a section marked Top Secret sent ice through her veins. A second transmission, not from space, but from Earth. Someone within the US government had sent a response in 1980. Not just a simple acknowledgement, not a neutral reply, an invitation. The air in the archive room felt suddenly too thin. Who had authorized this? Why had no one ever spoken of it? More importantly, what had they invited? Mara's hands shook as she stuffed the papers back into the folder. She knew she had uncovered something she was never meant to see. But the real question was she already too late? The first WOW signal had been a whisper in the void, an anomaly, a fleeting moment of cosmic curiosity. The second was a roar. Dr. Mara Calloway stared at the data streaming across her screen in disbelief. It had started as a routine late-night session at the Green Bank Observatory, her mind still reeling from the classified documents she had stolen days before. She hadn't dared tell anyone about them yet, not even her closest colleagues. Not until she could be sure. But now, as she watched the live feed from the Deep Space Array, doubt no longer had a place. It was happening again. The signal blazed across the radio spectrum, 17 times stronger than the original. No background noise, no interference, just pure, unfiltered transmission. Unlike its predecessor, this one wasn't fading in and out. It was sustained, deliberate, as if someone or something was making sure it was received. Mara's breath hitched as she ran an immediate decryption analysis. The raw data unfolded into unmistakable patterns. Binary, pulse-modulated frequencies, mathematical sequences far beyond natural cosmic radiation. But this time, there was something new. A set of coordinates. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing them with NASA's star charts. The location was just beyond the Oort cloud, the icy boundary marking the farthest edge of the solar system. A place humanity had never explored. A place something was waiting. Mara's hands trembled. This wasn't a message anymore. It was a beacon, a response, a destination. Then, as the decryption continued, a new layer of data emerged. At first, it looked like an echo, repeated fragments from the original 1977 signal. But the deeper she analyzed it, the more chilling the truth became. This wasn't an echo. It was a hidden message buried within the original transmission. It hadn't been a greeting. It had been a distress signal. Mara's mind raced. This meant whoever sent the first "wow" signal hadn't been reaching out in curiosity. They had been calling for help, and worse, something had already answered. Her heart pounded as a realization set in. The reply humanity had sent in 1980 wasn't just an invitation. Mara barely slept. The second "wow" signal had turned her world inside out, but there was no time for hesitation. Someone had buried the truth about the first transmission for over 4 decades. Someone had sent a response, and now they knew it was coming back. She wasn't the only one watching the skies. Her paranoia began as a whisper. Unfamiliar cars parked near her apartment, her emails failing to send, a shadow that lingered too long outside the observatory. At first, she thought it was just her mind unraveling under the weight of what she had uncovered. Then Dr. Elias Porter disappeared. Porter was a former SETI researcher, one of the few who had once shared Mara's obsession with extraterrestrial signals. She had reached out to him after decoding the coordinates, hoping to verify her findings. He had responded cautiously, agreeing to meet her in person. He never showed. His home was found ransacked, his research wiped clean. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, just erased. Mara's blood ran cold. He wasn't the first. Digging through old SETI records, she found a disturbing pattern. A dozen astrophysicists, signal analysts, and cryptographers, all gone. Some died in accidents. Some resigned suddenly and vanished off the grid. Others had their reputations destroyed before they could publish anything. One name surfaced again and again in declassified government reports. The Watchers. They weren't an official agency. No headquarters, no public record. Just a scattered network of powerful individuals embedded in space agencies, defense departments, and intelligence circles across the world. Their mission? To control information about extraterrestrial contact. And now, Mara had crossed into their territory. A cold shiver ran down her spine as she logged into her secure server to check her research notes. Access denied. She tried again. Access denied. Someone was already shutting her down. Then her phone buzzed. No caller ID. She hesitated before answering. The voice on the other end was calm, almost patient. Dr. Calloway, you need to stop, for your own safety. The call ended before she could respond. Mara's pulse pounded. The message wasn't a warning. It was a final notice. Her heart raced as she grabbed her keys and laptop. If the Watchers had erased every scientist before her, she had only one option left. To disappear before they erased her, too. But she wasn't going to run. She was going to expose them. Mara's escape from the observatory was barely more than a blur. She had no time to think, only to run. The Watchers were closing in, and with each passing hour, she could feel the walls tightening around her. She didn't trust anyone anymore, not her colleagues, not the government, and certainly not the shadowy organization that had been watching the skies for decades. But the message in the coordinates had left no choice. Something was coming, and it was no longer just a theoretical anomaly or a distant curiosity. It was real. She reached out to the only group she could trust, an underground team of rogue scientists and hackers she had once worked with on a confidential AI project. They were experts in deep space communication, but more importantly, they had the resources to send a countersignal. In a hidden room in an abandoned facility, the team worked in silence, the hum of machinery filling the air. Mara's fingers trembled as she typed, coordinating with them as they constructed the response. The broadcast had to be precise. No mistakes, no loose ends. If the Watchers were listening, they couldn't risk exposing their hand. The countersignal was simple but urgent. A direct acknowledgement of the coordinates, a statement of intent, and a request for communication. Nothing overtly threatening, just enough to elicit a clear answer. It was a calculated gamble, one Mara knew could cost her everything. Send it. The moment the signal was broadcast, the room went eerily still. For a long while, nothing happened. The team stared at their screens, eyes wide, waiting for a sign. A response. Then the screen flickered. A single line of text blinked into existence, clear, precise, and in perfect English. You have answered. Now you must face the consequences. Mara's heart stopped. There was no ambiguity. It wasn't a greeting. It wasn't a welcome. It was a warning. Before she could react, a second line appeared. 72 hours. The countdown has begun. The room fell silent again, but this time, the weight of the words hung like a storm cloud, suffocating the air. Mara's mind raced as she tried to process the meaning. Consequences. What consequences? What would happen in 72 hours? She turned to her team, their faces pale, every one of them feeling the same cold sweat creeping over them. One of the hackers' eyes glued to the screen. The world had been on edge for 72 hours. The countdown loomed over humanity like an invisible guillotine, its weight growing heavier with each passing moment. Governments had gone into lockdown, communication channels were scrambled, and global leaders convened in secrecy. The message was clear. Something was coming, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Mara, her heart still pounding from the warning, had spent every waking moment preparing. She knew she was being watched. Every move she made felt like a calculated risk. Every interaction with her team was filled with tension. As the final hour approached, she stood in the observatory, staring at the dark sky through the massive windows. There was a cold, unsettling stillness in the air. And then it happened. At first, it was a subtle shift, an eerie vibration in the air almost imperceptible. The hum of the earth itself seemed to change, as if the planet had become aware of something it could not understand. People looked up at the sky from every corner of the globe. Some whispered of strange lights. Others saw inexplicable shadows flickering just beyond the edge of their vision. But what came next was undeniable. A massive object, immense, towering, appeared at the edge of Earth's atmosphere, visible to the naked eye. It was not like anything humanity had ever built. No spacecraft, no satellite, no alien craft. It was far more than that. It was Monument. A black shifting mass that seemed to defy all laws of physics, rippling like liquid metal in the vacuum of space. The world held its breath. Mara's team watched from their control center, eyes glued to the monitors as the object descended. She felt a deep, primal dread. Something was terribly wrong? This wasn't a ship. It wasn't an invasion. This wasn't even something alienous in the way humanity had imagined it for centuries. It was something far more unsettling. The object descended slowly, almost deliberately, as if it were sizing up the planet. There was no explosion, no violent crash landing, just the eerie, silent descent of this otherworldly shape, growing ever larger on the horizon. And then, with a sudden flash, it came to a halt just above the Earth's surface, suspended in midair. The atmosphere crackled. Mara's breath hitched as a low, vibrating hum filled the air, originating from the object itself. A sudden voice crackled through the communication system. It wasn't alien. It was human. But it wasn't from the past. The voice was calm, cold, and impossibly familiar. "We come from the future," it said. Mara's knees nearly buckled as the truth hit her like a tidal wave. The wow signal, the message she had spent years chasing, had never been sent by an alien civilization. It had been a warning from humanity's own future, from a future that had already made the mistake of answering the first signal. The voice continued, its tone icy, as if speaking to an inferior being. "You were never meant to receive our message. Your answer has triggered an irreversible chain of events." Mara clutched the edge of the console as the full scope of their mistake became clear. The invitation, the warning, the distress signal, they had all been sent by future humans, not aliens trying desperately to prevent the very event that had led to their own apocalyptic fate. The mistakes they had made, the choices they had set in motion. It was all too late now. A crackling noise filled the room as the voice paused. Then came the final revelation, the cruelest betrayal of all. The signal was never an invitation, it was a test of whether your civilization would answer, and now your future is sealed. Mara's heart stopped. It wasn't just that they had answered the signal, it was that they had become the signal. The future humans had sent the wow, signal to ensure that history followed its destructive course. By answering, humanity had sealed their fate. The apocalypse wasn't coming from the stars, it had always been right in them. As the object began to disintegrate, the skies erupted into brilliant light, a final pulse of energy sweeping across the planet. A wave of heat and destruction followed, and in an instant, humanity's hubris came crashing down. The future had arrived, not as saviors, but as executioners. Mara stood alone, staring at the destruction in the sky. In the distance, the object flickered and faded, leaving only ashes in its wake. The world was silent. The countdown had ended, and humanity had failed the test. But even in the shadow of the catastrophe, Mara realized the cruelest twist. The message had never truly been a warning. It had been the beginning of a self-fulfilling prophecy, a twisted loop that would never end. They were trapped in their own timeline, doomed to repeat the same mistakes forever.